Good evening, Captain Retired Matt Edwards here with 28 of July 2022 Facebook Live Observation Post Weekly Report. Anyway, I just posted the draft ideas that I intend to talk about. I don't intend to be here all night, so I'll try to just whiz through. The first thing I put up there was, let me see, review SISIP, the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, Policy 901-102. And income replacement benefit stats, because I haven't done that of late. Now, what I'm getting at, one of the things that's occurring to me, is that the number of medical releases has been increasing since, the Afghanistan war. So it used to be about 1,000 to 1,500 per year, and in 2018 it was 2,500 per year. Now that will put pressure, financial pressure, on the government's programs, because of course you got more people and it'll cost them more money. Now one of the things that they're doing about that is clawbacks, but the problem is they're clawing back too much because they simply think that they can do it because they might write a law about it when they might not have the constitutional jurisdiction to do so, because property and civil rights like pensions and insurance are property. Therefore, the federal government doesn't have the jurisdiction to make laws to deprive people of their property. Okay, second point. Oh, I hit the wrong button on the Facebook. Point number 97, because I started to number them in my draft Word document type thing. Bradburn and Manuge. Bradburn was mentioned in the Manuge case, but not the name. Now, the Bradburn case is one that I've been talking about a lot. It was a case in 1875 in England, and a guy had an insurance policy, 31 pounds, a policeman, and he became involved in a railway accident, and he sued, to get damages. The company wanted to reduce the damages by the amount of the insurance because they said that he didn't suffer any damages because he was indemnified by the insurance policy. But the judges threw that argument out because, they were just trying to weasel out of paying. So they said that the insurance contract was something that the person bought, and the person who had to pay damages couldn't take it into account to claw back the damages. So in the Manuge case, they said the same thing. They were talking about the fact that a non-indemnity payment cannot be used to offset an indemnity payment. The person who's getting damages is getting indemnified for their injury. Therefore, that's the indemnity payment. So in the Manuge case, the indemnity payment was the Pension Act pension. And the non-indemnity payment, the payment which was an insurance contract, that was taking the indemnity into account, which is absolutely absurd. It's not supposed to happen that way, because the Bradburn case was about the exact opposite. Anyway, carrying on to point number 98. This could be really short if it keeps going like this. Point number 98. No pay, no work, and vice versa. Service is not related to Canada Pension Plan Disability, the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, or Income Replacement Benefit. What I'm getting at is that you don't have to serve the employer to get those payments. The Canada Pension Plan Disability is a form of insurance set up in 1966. It's conditional. It probably shouldn't be conditional, but they made it conditional. And the thing is, they're trying to save money all the time. So they changed the vesting period, for example, from 2 out of 3 years. That's what it was from 1966 until 1998. But in 1998, they made it to 4 out of 6 years. Now, the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act is a pension, is a piece of property. It's money that is put away and saved for retirement. The Service Income Support Insurance Plan is a policy-based insurance on paper, and you know, it's not related to actual service at the time. It's related to premiums being paid ahead of time. And the income replacement benefit, that could be looked at as sort of like workers' compensation, but for veterans, for soldiers, military members. Okay, number 99, actual versus apparent costs. Sometimes things might appear better, such as switching to cloth bags for shopping instead of a single-use plastic bag, but that isn't true when the full cost is taken into account. Now, people often, you know, they want to emphasize certain things, and they don't look at the full picture. So, you know, you have to take all the different factors into account. I'll go back to the usual, the program arrangement. One of the things that I'm always talking about, the program arrangement between the Service Income Support Insurance Plan and Veterans Affairs Canada, the Department of National Defence. Well, they didn't take into account that somebody else was taking the Canada Pension Plan into account, for example, or the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension. So they ought to have taken that into account. They either knew or ought to have known about the fact that you can't take something twice. So the Government of Canada at the Department of National Defence takes, say, the Canada Pension Plan Disability into account. Well, the thing is that the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension also takes the Canada Pension Plan Disability into account. And, not to be left out, the Government of Canada, through Veterans Affairs Canada, takes the Canada Pension Plan Disability into account. So you could lose up to $3 for every dollar you get in Canada Pension Plan Disability between these three government agencies: Canadian Forces Pension, the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, and the Income Replacement Benefit. Now, that's just one example. Another example is the, give me a second, I'll whistle here. Another example is the $20,000 income exemption when you're on income replacement benefit. Here's what they didn't factor in, take into account. The first thing is that the income replacement benefit is primarily the Service Income Support Insurance Plan, and it has a rehabilitation earnings formula that is not the same as Veterans Affairs Canada. Now, SISIP uses, they'll take 50% of the rehabilitation type earnings off when you're in rehabilitation and you're working. They'll take half of it off. At least you get to keep half, even though that's not right. But if you're not in a rehabilitation program, they take 100% into account. Now, there's no cap on it. So, obviously, if you make $100,000, you can keep up to $50,000. Now, the Veterans Affairs Program, they say you can only have $20,000 without clawback. So, they changed it from a flexible formula to a fixed formula, and that's only the first problem. The second problem I'll bring up right now, as I've talked about this before, the second problem is that, say you're in Canada Pension Plan Disability. Well, they have a limit too, $5,300. So after you make $5,300 while you're in a rehabilitation program, then you could lose your Canada Pension Plan, probably would. Now, if you have children and they're getting the children's pension from the Canada Pension Plan, then they would lose their Canada Pension Plan because you tried to get back to work. Now, if you're getting a Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension, it is tied to the Canada Pension Plan Disability too, and if you lose the Canada Pension Plan Disability, you lose your disablement Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension. Now tell me something. What the fuck is wrong with these people that they didn't notice all this stuff before they brought in that $20,000 stupid fucking rule? Okay? They should be smacked up the side of the head for not noticing their own fucking laws, their own rules. After all, they're the ones who wrote them. Now, point number 100, I'll whiz through it. I said, and I write these things probably weeks or a month ago, so I'm not exactly sure. I probably should have put more notes there. But I said SISIP and earnings loss benefit taken account of the pension plan disability is complicated. Well, I can't remember the name of the case that I am thinking of. Lombard comes to mind. But if you're getting one payment, it's simple. But if you get two payments and then one claws back the other one, it's complicated. Now, if you get the Canada Pension Plan plus SISIP plus the Canadian Forces Pension plus income replacement benefit, it gets damn complicated. Now, there's no excuse for them not sharing information, because the government should be allowed to share information under the Privacy Act, Section 82A. It can share information that it has obtained for similar purposes. Now, if you have a disablement Canadian Forces pension, you got a disablement Canada Pension Plan disability, you got a disablement SISIP Service Income Support Insurance Plan, and you have a disablement income replacement benefit, they're all about disablement. So why can't the government share the information with each other, and then instead of having, hopefully someone would have a light bulb come off on over their head, and they might say, hey, you know, we're taking account of the pension plan into account, and you're taking into account, and you're taking into account, and you're taking into account, you know, that's not fair. And then they might stop it. Because I don't think that we should have to sue them about something they should have avoided when they planned this whole process. So they have been totally negligent, maybe even criminally negligent. Because fraud in the criminal law has two elements. The first one is that deception or deceit is used, and the second element is that that deception or deceit must put your economic interest at risk. Now, if you're taking something into account 3 fucking times, isn't that affecting your economic interests? That is criminal fraud from the Olan Supreme Court of Canada 1979 case. It's not only civil law cases that I've looked up in the past. Now, point number 101, and I'm really cutting it short today. I mean, I thought it'd be a half hour, so here I am 10 minutes in. Part of it is I really don't want to be doing this shit, okay? Like, no offense intended to government. Our representatives shouldn't be doing this shit. We are supposed to be a democracy. Now, it occurred to me, and before I get into my point about property rights, it occurred to me the other day that the government seems to think of itself as a cohesive whole when it's supposed to be 3 fucking separate branches. So you have the people we elect, they're called, you know, the members of parliament. They're the legislature. Then you have the executive. In the States, it's called the executive, but here in Canada, it's called, you know, the branches of the government, you know, the cabinet. They are the people that do things. So the lawmakers make laws. The executive branch, they enforce the law. And you have the judiciary, the judges, and that is the third branch. Now, each two is supposed to watch the other one. But the government seems to think that if I go to my member of parliament about my Canada Pension Plan disability being approved, even though I didn't have enough time, you know, I didn't have enough contributions, they seem to want to cover up for the fact that the executive branch screwed up. Because the lawmakers make the law, and they say you need 4 to 6 years. Now, whether or not we like that rule, that was what they changed it to in 1998. So if a person doesn't have 4 out of 6 years, that's the preliminary test, and they don't go any further with the application. So then how come I got approved? I didn't want to be approved. I didn't even want to apply. What they do, the companies in Canada, the insurance companies, they and the government follow suit. They force people to apply for Canada Pension Plan disability by estimating the amount that you could get, even though, I'll move the cursor here so that my fancy light for my show doesn't go off. So the government forces people to apply. Now think about this. You could have been a soldier in Afghanistan and you might have got blown up with an IED. So you end up disabled. You lose your career. You get a lower Canada Canadian Forces pension, you get a lower count of the pension plan, then those two lower pensions reduce your service income support insurance plan, and then all of those reduce your income replacement benefit. Where's the justice there? They're not supposed to take anything into account with anything else. See? So if we had the government, like those branches looking after the other branches, well, the judiciary hopefully would crap on the other two if they were in cahoots, which is what seems to be going on. Because they don't want to get caught. And that's natural. Nobody wants to get caught doing something wrong. But what people don't seem to realize, and I thought of this recently with the tax on the lump sum payments for like the service income support insurance plan, the Manuge class action, you could not legally tax that payment because it was paid as a lump sum. Now, it doesn't say don't tax lump sums in the Income Tax Act. It says they will only tax a periodic payment. That takes a bit of thinking. So if the payment is periodic, they can try to charge taxes on it. But if the payment is not periodic, which is the definition of a lump sum, then they should not have had to pay pay tax on those, what I would call contract damages. They didn't get paid income. They got paid for breach of contract. Now that's a separate reason why they shouldn't have had to pay taxes. No one is supposed to pay income taxes on a lump sum, which is a capital payment. The capital is the amount of money that you're being paid to reimburse you for the loss you had because somebody screwed you over and you won in court. So the first thing they should have done is said, listen, boss, we can't tax this as income. It's capital. You could try to tax it as capital, but they're trying to call it income. Now, if you're going to try to tax something as income, it damn well better be income. But it's not. They could have lost the case. Then they wouldn't have gotten any payment. That's the way court works, right? I mean, you pay your money and you take your chances. Now, they had a good case. I mean, in fact, if you didn't know it, the government voted in the House of Commons to stop the Pension Act pension clawback under the Service Income Support Insurance Plan. But they never actually stopped it. Now ask yourself this, because it's one of my pet peeves. If Manulife is the contract, issuer, the underwriter, then how could our members of Parliament hold a vote in the House of Commons and vote to stop the Pension Act clawback? I think 9 years before the Dennis Manuge class action was finished. It might have been 7 years. But the thing is, it seems like we got a sort of a dictatorship in a way, because the government didn't like the vote. The minority government, the Conservatives, didn't like that vote, and somehow it never got passed. But the way I understand law, if you've got a minority government and a Bloc Québécois, the NDP and the Liberals ganged up on the Conservatives and they had more votes on any issue put to a vote, then it should have happened. And that could have saved a bunch of years' worth of litigation, obviously. Anyway, back to the property rights thing. Didn't make much notes there, but I'm pretty sure I'm thinking about the fact that insurance is a property right. Damages are a property right. Pensions are a property right. And do you know who owns the exclusive jurisdiction for making law on civil and property rights? The provinces. So if the government makes a law and says, for example, that we're going to take your pension, the Canadian Forces pension, which is property, we're going to reduce your income replacement benefit, which is also property. We're going to reduce this property with that property payment. Well, they don't have a constitutional leg to stand on. Now, unfortunately, they're doing it anyway. So somebody has to take them to task in the judicial branch and point this simple fact out they would do if I'm right. I mean, I could be delusional, but you'd think I'd know better. And you think somebody'd tell me if I'm delusional. Okay. Someone would say, first of all, if I was the one doing it, or if I was helping someone do it, I'd say, okay, has the law changed since 1990 in the Clark versus Clark Supreme Court of Canada case where they said that the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension is a property right? They'd say no, because it hasn't. Okay, now we've established that the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension is property and not income. What is your rationalization? What is your justification behind reducing the amount of income replacement benefit or the service income support insurance plan because the person is getting their property back to the government banked as a trustee, because that's how pensions work. It's the law of trusts. So you have the person who puts the money in the bank and the person who holds the money in the bank who is a fiduciary. Now the fiduciary is supposed to look after the money that they're holding on to for someone else, as if they are the other person, and do what's in their best interest, not their own. Now, with that in mind, you could ask the question to them under oath, and you would say, can you tell me about the legislative history of Canadian Forces Superannuation Act, Section 15.2b, which is the bridging part of the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act? Because it reduces the person's property, because oftentimes they are disabled, and oftentimes disabled in military service to Canada. So they get a reduced Canadian Canada pension plan disability, and then the bridging portion of the law, that reduces the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act pension even more. Now, had they served a full 35 years before being released, they would get 70% pension under the Canadian Forces Superannuation Act. But they became injured in military service many times, and now you want to reduce that person's money, call it income, call it property, where the fuck you want, but that person took a bullet for you, you son of a bitch. Now, do you see why I'm doing this all the time? They have no shame. They should look at what's happening. And on that bridging issue, that's another one that went to a vote in the House Commons. Private Members Bill by Peter Stauffer. And they ganged up on the Conservatives again. They had a minority government, and they ganged up on them, and they all voted to stop the bridging, at least in the case of disabled people in the RCMP and the Canadian Forces. So, that never happened either. Now, that case hasn't gone to trial yet. But should it go to trial? Like we know, if you've been following some of the stuff I've been saying this a lot. In 1964, Minister Judy LaMarche, she stated that the Canada Pension Plan would provide help as of right, because it has this disability portion. And she was asked a question by Mr. Chatterton. He was in the opposition. And he said, listen, if we have a public servant who becomes disabled, and they're going to get a disablement public service superannuation act pension, will they also get the Canada Pension Plan disability? And she said, yes, of course. If he has 5 or 6 pensions, he will get them all. Well, some people might say that's awful expensive. But he's simply getting his own property back. How can you reduce one property if you're getting it back from the employer who held it in trust for you? In the example I gave, in the past, and I'll use it again. Say you got 6 different companies you work for her, 30 years. 5 years apiece, company A, B, C, D, E, F, and fucking G. Now, each one of them you paid into a pension and you vested so you couldn't take the money back. When you retire and you meet conditions in the plans, you will get all of those pensions. You'll get 6 small pensions instead of 1 big one. That's the way pensions work. Now, what the government has done, not with the pension, but with the new Veterans Charter, is they have created a welfare program where only people who need the money get the money, and that ignores the fact that you're supposed to be getting compensated for your military injury in Canada's service. So that is a big problem. If they look at it as, well, it's our money, so we can do what we want. But if you're getting a right because you gave up the right to sue to get that, just like workers' compensation, the employer gets your right to sue and you get compensation in exchange. But the government wants to reduce your compensation because you own property. That's horrible. And, as usual, my eyes are going a bit blurry and I'm going to call it a night. So, have a good weekend and I'll see you on next Thursday.